Right, welcome back, everybody, after a long break for the Chagim. It's good to be back, learning again. We left off with two pieces of homework, one for David Marks and one for me. Um, Anybody remember what they were, apart from David, who, of course, has done his homework? Anybody remember what the homework was even from 5 weeks ago? No. Okay. David, I'm sure that you remember it, and I'm sure you've been diligent. Tell us about it.
No, it was just a grammatical issue about the king taking the Torah out with him when he goes out, and the phrase in the Mishnah is Yotzei la milchama motziah ima, and ima doesn't make sense unless we're talking about a female king or a queen. So I looked in other sources. As you commented 5 weeks ago, in your edition of the Gemarah, you've got exactly the same grammar. If you look at the big boys Gemarah, as you refer to it, the Vilna Shas, exactly the same. So then, if you take a look in an ordinary Mishnah book without the Gemarah, look, for example, Art Scroll Mishnah, Kahati Mishnah. There's another set of Mishnahs I have here. It says Motzia Imo. And if you look in Sifrei, in the Gemarah,
But one second, David, let me just remind everybody what we're talking about on the screen. I've put it on the screen for you. We're talking about this part of the Mishnah. From here, V'kotev lo Sefer Torah lishmo. He has to write. We're talking about a king. He has to write a Sefer Torah for its own sake. In other words, an extra Sefer Torah. Yotzei la milchama. When he goes out to war, motziah. He takes it, the Sefer Torah, ima. And that was our problem, because that means with her. And it should say, as David has pointed out, it should say imo, with him. That was our grammatical problem. The second part of the Mishnah is correct. Nichnas, when he comes back from war, hu machnisa, he brings it back, imo, with him. So that word imo, with him, should be the same over there. And this says with her. And that was the question that we set. Now, so David has so far said that there are versions where it has been changed. Here's Jackie, we'll let him in. There we go. Right, David, carry on. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Well, not necessarily changed, but the fact that in the Vilna Shas it says Ima, I think that there was probably a mistake, either a mistake in the manuscript that was taken from, or it was miscopied from the manuscript. But the fact that Sifrei has the correct vowel, and so do editions of Mishnah, that would lead me to believe that there was a mistake in the way that the Vilna Shas copied the manuscript.
Okay, so that is a rather practical and almost certainly, I think, correct explanation of how we got here, because it doesn't make any other sense any other way. And of course, it's worth mentioning, isn't it, that the Mishnah that we have, or the Gemarah that we have, was in fact a manuscript until the advent of the printing press in, what was that, 15th century or 16th century. Those of you who came with us to the Slichot tour, where we went to the National Library, the new National Library, will have seen there a first edition. Berenbaum, was it Berenbaum? What was he called? Edition of first edition printed a printed Gemarah, the very first edition, which of course was copied out from a manuscript. And that was absolutely brilliant. It was amazing to see that. And in the next case, by the way, was a manuscript of the Rambam in the Rambam's own handwriting, with his corrections made and his crossings out and everything. It was really amazing. Those of you who haven't yet been to the National Library must go. I think we need to go again because we didn't have long enough there. It's absolutely brilliant place. But there was there a first edition. Now, we need to remember that the fact that there are so few mistakes in copying is a miracle, actually, rather than looking at the other way around saying, oh, look, this is a printing error. The fact that there are so few printing errors and so few proof reading issues is really quite remarkable, especially when you consider that in the 13th century, 24 wagon loads of manuscripts of the Gemarah were burned following the debate, the famous debate in France, where 24 wagon loads of manuscripts. Now, can you imagine how valuable that must have been? I mean, millions to have a manuscript of the Gemarah, and then 24 cartloads of them were burned. I mean, it's really remarkable. It's really remarkable that we've still got a Gemarah that looks anything like the original Gemarah. Never mind the odd mistake. So I think David Marks's research there, I think, is the correct answer. But what I want to show you now is, and I know I've done this before, but this is such a brilliant example that I have to show it you, because I also did some research and came up with the same answer as David, not so much detail because I didn't go to the individual printings, but I also came up with the same idea that this was a printing error. But just for fun, I asked ChatGPT. Now, look at the absolute rubbish that ChatGPT produced. Just look at this. Right. So I said the Mishnah in Sanhedrin 21b has a grammatical difficulty. Yotzela milchama motzia ima nichnas hu machnisa imo. Can you explain ima and imo? Right. So look what it says to me. It says, I won't go through the whole thing to you, but it basically talks about a complete different subject. He says that this Mishnah is talking about a wife that he takes out to war with him, right? When he goes out to war, he takes her, the wife, with him, expressed as Ima. And then he says, when he brings him back, and then he goes on to tell me what Rashi says about this nonsense, right? He quotes a non-existent Rashi, and then it quotes a Rash, right? And then it gives you a thematic reading on what it's all about, right? Poetically, the Mishnah is describing King David's behavior with his wives, contrasting the later warning against multiplying wives. It's absolute nonsense, right? And then he gives me a whole summary here. And then I said to it, I got a bit cross with it, really. What I said, this is complete rubbish. It's talking about a Sefer Torah and a king. Oh, there's ChatGPT. You're absolutely right, he says. Thank you for catching that. Let's start again. I mean, it's just outrageous. And then he starts to get a bit more sensible, and we get a decent answer here. And he brings a bit of a sort of poetic idea of the Sefer Torah, which is not particularly easy to understand, and he thinks it's a play on words. And then I've said, I still don't think that makes sense. And then he thinks for 46 seconds, and he says, you're right. And then he tries again. And then we get, finally, at the third attempt, we get to what David Marks has told us all together in the first place, that there are different printings of it. And we get the bottom line being that it's a printing error. So if you were just an innocent user of ChatGPT, you would not only not get the right answer, you would be taken to a complete load of rubbish, right? Where the whole subject of the Mishnah is nothing to do with what the ChatGPT says. Now, just so that was very interesting. I had to show you that just because it was so absurd.
Silly question.
Now, yes, Michael.
A silly question going back to the original she rather than he. Is there any possibility that the she was correct?
Well, it's difficult to understand it because it doesn't mean she, it means with her. When he goes out to war, he takes it, the Sefer Torah, with her. So as David said, it can only be if it's a female king. Well, it can't be a female king because it says Yotzei, which is in the masculine, unless we're very modern and this is one of those gender fluid kings who is a he and a she. But other than that, it's very difficult to understand this grammar. So
the reason I wonder about that is, okay, I don't dispute that at all. The reason I wonder is that certainly as time went on, the females were put further and further into the background, and therefore that might have been a reason for the change. That's the only reason I asked the question.
It's a fair question, but I can't see how it could have been right even in the first place, because it's grammatically incorrect.
Okay, fine, thank you.
And inconsistent. Now, just to finish the ChatGPT nonsense, you can see I'm a bit on a crusade against ChatGPT at the moment because that really wound me up. Just this morning,
numerous times.
Yeah, but this was outrageous. I mean, it's tried it on before, but this was outrageous. Now, just as a pure coincidence, on my this is another scary thing, by the way. My Google search knows that I am anti-ChatGPT because just this morning on my Google search, I came up with a story which I didn't ask it for. It just, it suggests stories you might be interested in. Well, one of the stories it suggested I might be interested in was a barrister who has got a right royal Misha Beirach from a judge for quoting cases that didn't exist. And of course, he'd got them from ChatGPT and he hadn't bothered to check them. And they just plain didn't exist. They just made them up. And so that came up just this morning on my Google feed. So Google knows exactly what I'm thinking and knows what I need to buy, knows when we run out of toilet paper. And it's a very, very scary world. But just be warned that if you are going to rely on ChatGPT, you have to check the sources. It is very, very good at putting stuff together and summarizing, but you cannot rely on its opinions. I think we've proved that once and for all. Right, I'm finished with that now, but it was fascinating. Anybody remember what my homework was? My homework was to find out definitively who can make Kiddush for whom. Whether a woman can make Kiddush for man, etc., etc. I think it was Jackie actually who raised that issue.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. Anyway, what I said was actually turned out to be correct. My initial suggestion was correct, and that is anybody who is a bar chiyuva, anybody who is somebody who is bound by that obligation. In other words, if the woman is bound by the obligation, she can do it for a man. So we used the example of the shofar. Now, it wasn't a great example, that, because there is a machloket between the Sephardi poskim and the Ashkenazi poskim as to whether women are actually obliged to hear the shofar. So that wasn't a good example. But Kiddush, everybody is in agreement that women have to listen to Kiddush, and therefore women can make Kiddush for men. And we had the other question, part of the question was, what would be preferable? A woman making Kiddush for a man in Hebrew, or a man making Kiddush for himself or for everybody else, but in English because he doesn't know any Hebrew and he hasn't got a transliterated thing. And that was an interesting question. What do we think around the room here? What's preferable, a woman in Hebrew or a man in English? Okay, I'm going to go one at a time. One at a time round my screen. I'm going to start with Michael because he's in the top left-hand corner right now. Michael?
I think it depends.
Oh, that's a great answer. Yeah. On what?
I know in the past some rabbis say you should, whatever you do, you should do it in Hebrew because that is the language of the prayers, and then and other rabbanim will turn around and say no, it's got to be so you can understand it.
Okay, so we've got a situation here where he doesn't understand Hebrew, can't even read the Hebrew, but does understand English, whereas the woman can say the Hebrew and understands the Hebrew. Now, what's your answer?
Back to me again.
Yeah.
I think I'd go with the woman.
Because?
Because she covers all bases.
Okay. Vivian, otherwise known as Leslie.
Yeah, you're right. I'm concerned about the embarrassment for the man. Obviously, people may not realize that he can't read Hebrew. And if he says it in English, it's embarrassing for him, assuming that it's a crowd that's just friends. So I'm honestly, so I suppose what he could say is, Mrs. Whatever, oh, you know what, you make Kiddush for everyone. Yeah, the woman to make
woman. It. Okay, so 2-0 to the women. Jeffrey, you're next.
Well, if the woman is the hostess and it's her house and she doesn't have a husband and whatnot, I think it's perfectly permissible for the woman to make Kiddush at her table for everybody.
Okay, she's married to a bloke who doesn't know how to read Hebrew, and he is there.
Okay, well, I was just quoting a single woman.
Yeah, I'm giving you the scenario now.
Okay,
she's married to a bloke who doesn't know how to read Hebrew.
I think in that case, I think the woman should still say it in Hebrew.
Okay, 3-0 to the women. Julia, you're not going to disappoint me, are you? And say the man, surely not.
I'm afraid I'm going to say both. I think that the correct answer should be that it's the woman can say it. However, I believe that the correct answer is likely to be that, notwithstanding that, it is the man.
Okay, so Julia's going bottom line with the man. David Marks.
Depends who else is present.
Let's keep it simple. There's nobody else present, just the two of them.
I'd go with a woman.
Okay, all right. Jackie, you're last.
With one proviso. Isn't there an issue with Kiddush being mitzvah saseh shehazman Grammar?
Yes, but we said you're right. But the
woman is exempt.
Yeah, but we said at the beginning she is a bar chiyuva, according to the poskim for Kiddush, because of Zachor v'Shamar. Okay, because there are two aspects of Shabbat, Zachor v'Shamor, and a part of it is a positive commandment and part of it is a negative commandment. She is obligated, and so all the poskim say that she is obligated in Kiddush.
So
This-
Zochar is Zochrehu alayayin, but where do you get Shomer from as far as Kiddush is concerned?
No, it's because of the Zachor v'Shamor. She's obligated in everything to do with Shabbat.
Okay.
That's how they paskin.
Okay.
Okay, so we're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And Jackie, what are you going to say?
I should say that the man in English and the woman makes the motzi in Hebrew.
You mean makes the Kiddush in Hebrew?
No, the motzi on the bread.
Aha. Okay, that's an interesting one. Why'd you say that?
Because the poskim now say that if you go to shul and you can't understand the Hebrew, you should read all the prayers in whatever language suits you, whatever you can. In English is English, in English, whatever. So everybody understands.
Okay. Right. So I'll tell you what I think. I think that the closest to the right answer was a mixture of Michael and Jackie and Julia. And you'll see in a minute what I think. Because the correct way of doing this, in my view, and I'll tell you my logic, and you feel free to disagree, is this. Michael said that there are two aspects to this. One is the prayers should be said in Hebrew, if possible, because there is a Kedusha. There's a holiness to the Hebrew language. What do we call Hebrew, in fact? What do we call it? Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language. So there is some intrinsic value to the Hebrew language. However, and we've said many times before, Ravido, when he came here, thought we were all completely bonkers, saying all our prayers in Hebrew, and when we didn't understand a word of it, he thought that we were completely mad. For us, of course, that's what we learned when we were in Cheder. And the fact that we didn't understand it, well, okay, we know more or less what it means. It's praying, isn't it? That's all, right? But he thought that was mad, because what you ought to be doing is understanding your prayers. So I think that the correct procedure would be this. The woman says it in Hebrew because she can. We've already said she is allowed to say it in Hebrew on behalf of the man. And that satisfies her obligation because she can read Hebrew and she understands the Hebrew. She knows what Borei Peri Hagafen means, right? But our poor fellow, he's just hearing words, isn't he? He doesn't know it. So he has to translate it. So I think the correct way to do it is for the woman to say it in Hebrew, and thereby we get the intrinsic value of the Lashon HaKodesh, and the guy then says it in English so that he can understand what has just been said, and therefore has the dual benefit. He says Amen to her bracha, so he's got the Hebrew, he's got the value, if you like, of the Hebrew, the intrinsic value, and he understands it because he's read the English translation. So I think that's the correct way of doing it in our scenario, where you have a man and a woman. I mean, you can imagine this, Leslie, can't you, with our friends that our friends that we're seeing next to you in shul today, right? You've got a situation there where it may well be that the woman knows a lot more than the man. Mm-hmm. The man's not able to do it in Hebrew. Yep. That would be the correct way to do it, in my opinion. Now, anybody want to?
So what's the difference between that and two men together, where one understands and the other doesn't? So according to that, the one lacking in understanding should make Kiddush again in his native language.
Or at least read the translation, at least read the translation to himself. Yeah, you're right, David. You're right. Because if we're going to say that the ideal is that you understand your prayers, which of course it is, then yes, I would agree.
Johnny, I think that's very demeaning, and I think you're putting the man down and putting him in a very embarrassing situation.
When he's on his own with his wife, who already knows that he can't speak Hebrew, otherwise she wouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Doesn't matter. It's still demeaning the man.
Oh, shut up.
Isn't there also a problem in you're doing the same blessing twice over the same thing? I mean, it's like when you do the Kiddush, you're not supposed to, if you say it yourself first, you're not supposed to sing it afterwards again. Isn't there a problem there?
I'm not sure that saying "Blessed are you, the Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine," in English would count as a bracha levatala. I think it's when you use Shem u'malchut, as we say, when you use the terms Yud Ke Vav Ke, which we pronounce as Adonai, and then you use Elokeinu with a Hey, in a situation where it doesn't require a bracha. So I can say, when something happens that doesn't really require a Shechianu, but I want to express my feelings that I'm happy that this situation has arisen, I can say Baruch Shechianu v'kimanu v'kiyanu la'zman hazeh without saying Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu. Okay, so I think the same applies. I don't think that it's a bracha levatala if you say it in English as well as Hebrew. Anybody disagree with that? Maybe we should look it up, but I'm not going to ask ChatGPT, don't worry. Okay, interesting. All right, Jackie. Jackie thinks we're demeaning the man. It's not intended to demean, that's for sure. And I would go further to say that what Leslie said, which is what it would be embarrassing if there were friends around, then I would suggest that probably the best thing is for him to read it, to himself quietly, without saying it out loud for that reason.
If he's got friends around, though, the guy would most probably nominate one of his friends there, the Cohen or the Levi, to do it, or like you do in Beit Hasamozon.
Yeah.
Could be. Yeah, could be. Yeah, and if there was a man there who could do it, it would probably be preferable for a man to do it than his wife. Yeah, I mean, we could have all sorts of different scenarios, can't we? Where no men now know how to do it and only the woman and some men. But I think we've got the concept. The concept is that a woman can say Kiddush for a man. It's preferable for a man to do so. And it's preferable for everybody to understand what they're saying. I think those are the things that we've managed to extract from this scenario. Okay, anyone got anything else to say before we turn to the Mishnah? No, okay, good, right. So let's carry on in the Mishnah. It's on the screen for you. It's page 125 if you are in the Steinsaltz English. It's on 21b 2 if you're in the Art Scroll. And it's towards the end of the Mishnah. We're talking here, let me just show you what we're talking about here. Our famous pasuk in Parashat Shoftim, chapter 17. Jeffrey, if you could read verses 15 to 19, that is the part of the Torah that this Mishnah is dealing with.
You shall set a king over you, one whom the Lord your God chooses from among your brothers. You shall set a king over yourself. You shall not appoint a foreigner over yourself, one who is not your brother. Only he may not acquire many horses for himself, so that he will not bring the people back to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. For the Lord said to you, you shall not return that way any more. And he shall not take many wives for himself, and his heart must not turn away, and he shall not acquire much silver and gold for himself. And it will be, when he sits upon his royal throne, that he shall write for himself 2 copies of this Torah on a scroll from that Torah which is before the Levitic Kohanim. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of this Torah and these statutes, to perform them, so that his heart will not be haughty over his brothers, and so that he will not turn away from the commandment, either to the right or to the left, in order that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his sons amongst Israel.
Okay, it's a great little parasha, isn't it? Really, I mean, it's fabulous. It's known as Parashat HaMelech, the portion of the king, for obvious reasons. And verses 18 and 19 are what we are discussing in our Mishnah right now. We are going, when we start the Gemarah, we're going to go back, as you know, the Gemarah dissects the Mishnah. So when we start the Gemarah, we're going to be going back to the horses business, which is at the beginning of the Mishnah. But we're working our way through the Mishnah right now, and there it is back on the screen for you. So as you can see, the first part of the Mishnah was talking about the horses, and then we started talking about the Sefer Torah. We've been discussing up till now this grammatical thing about the with her or with him, but the bottom line is the Sefer Torah goes out to war. And if you remember, I showed you the picture of Rav Goren last time with his Sefer Torah at the Kotel in 1967. I showed you Rabbi David Yitzchak Friedman with the Anzac Sefer Torah in Gallipoli. And they were great historical photographs, both of them, which demonstrate our Mishnah. So now we're up to here. This is now new stuff. Yoshev Badin, when he sits in judgment, he, imo, she is with him. Now, that does not refer to a wife, as we heard earlier on. That's referring to the Sefer Torah. Now, interesting, because very, very interesting, and David will know this from very clearly from Parshat Nitzavim, and that is the word Torah is feminine, and the word Sefer is masculine. Okay, so I am going to be a little bit homiletical here, and because literally we have said he should write a Sefer Torah, right? And when he sits in judgment, we would say in English, it should be with him, because in English, non-human or non-animal things don't have a gender. So a book, a Sefer Torah, is an it, not a he or a she. But in Hebrew, they do have genders. I think it should say hu imo. It is with him, because we're talking about the Sefer Torah. Now, why do I say that about Nitzavim? Is because there's a little bit in Nitzavim where it talks about there are two things: Haktuvah b'Sefer Hazeh and Haktuvah b'Sefer HaTorah Hazeh. Am I right, David?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about writing in the Sefer Torah, right, it is Sefer HaTorah Hazeh, not Hazot. But if it was Haktuvah Batorah, it would be Haktuvah Batorah Hazot, which is the feminine form of this. Okay, so I would like to say that really that should say hu imo, the Sefer Torah is with him. But I think homiletically it's he, because it's not about the actual Sefer Torah, is it? It's about what's written in it. And in other words, it's about the content, which is what we would describe as the Torah. So it's not enough, I would say. I mean, I'm making all this up as I go along, but I think it works, and you can make a nice drosha out of this. It says he imo and not hu imo, because it's not about having a Sefer Torah and not knowing what's in it. And actually, this follows on very nicely from our previous discussion, which is all about davening and saying brachot and not knowing what's in them, not knowing what it means, right? It's all very well if a king's got a Sefer Torah with him when he has judgment, right? So here we go. I've got my Oxford Handbook of General Practice next to me the whole time while I'm giving my opinions on general practice, right? A patient comes in, and I've got this next to me the whole time. It's not much use unless I know what's in it, right? So it's not much use the king having the Sefer Torah next to him when he's in judgment unless he knows the content of it. So I would like to say that he imo is deliberate, that it means the content of the Torah not the actual Sefer. It's all very nice having one of those beautiful Sifrei Torah, and you know, one of those beautiful Sephardi ones with all sorts of nobbles on it, and you know, they're great. Those things, they're beautiful. But actually, what's really important is what's inside. We've got a beautiful one in Shul in the Bet Midrash, a small one, beautifully painted and everything. It's empty, nothing in it. It's just a case, which doesn't help anybody. So I'd like to say that he imo means that the content should be with him when he sits in judgment. Now then, stop there without looking in the notes, which are down here at the bottom of this page. I'm not going to put it on the screen. So Michael Krause, who's got the Sefer, don't cheat. What's the problem with that statement? That the statement is, when he sits in judgment, the Sefer Torah or the Torah is with him.
Which should be open.
All right.
So you can look inside it for... it
should be open. All right, let's assume it is open. What's the problem with that? It's still a problem. Can't hear you, Michael Krause. You're muted.
Heavy and bulky.
Okay, you can have a mini one.
It's too small. The print's too small.
Print's too small. Anyone? David? Any suggestions?
No, I've looked, so I've cheated.
David's cheated. That was so honest. Very good. Well done, David. Tell us then, what's the problem?
That we learnt above that a king can't judge cases.
Yeah, king's not allowed to judge. We learnt it in Yud Chet Amud Aleph. See if I can find it. Let's have a look. We learnt over here that a judge, a king cannot judge and cannot be judged. It's in the previous Mishnah, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Hamelech. Right, here we go. Yud Chet Amud Aleph. In the first Mishnah, I'll read it out to you because I can't just find it on the screen without spending a minute or two. Hamelech lo dan. A king does not judge. Velo danin oto. And nobody can judge him. Remember when we did that all that time ago, remember we spoke about the UK. A monarch cannot be tried in that scenario, unless you're Charles II. But a monarch, you can't have Rex versus Rex, can you? Because every case is the monarch, officially, the monarch versus the defendant. Am I right, Julia?
Yes, the criminal cases are, yeah.
Yeah. So we learnt earlier on that, and I want to come back to what Julia's just said in a moment. We just learnt that earlier on that a king cannot sit in judgment. So what's this Mishnah talking about? When he sits in judgment, the Sefer Torah is with him. He's not allowed to sit in judgment. Go on, Julia, what's the answer?
Well, I can't remember what we actually discussed, but I'm sure that we discussed that there were exceptions. And I specifically remember that we discussed about King Solomon, who we know sat in judgment. So there must have been exceptions, and there must have been specific things that the king couldn't judge and other things that he was able to judge.
Excellent. All of those things are correct, all of the above. So one of the things that we learnt, if you recall, was that this did not apply to kings of the Davidic dynasty. It only applied to kings of Israel, as opposed to the kings of Yehudah, who were of Davidic origin. So, of course, we know that Shlomo judged. We know the famous case that he judged, don't we, of the mother, two mothers and one baby, known forevermore as the Judgment of Solomon. And so, yes, that was one exception. Very good, Julia. And the other exception is a bit what you just said. Rewind and say, yes, kings are allowed to sit in judgment of monetary cases. So if you have a look down the bottom over here in the notes, okay, have a look at this. There over there. When he sits in judgment, he's with him. Although the Mishnah teaches that the king may not sit as a judge on the Sanhedrin, that's what we learnt in 18a, it seems that this Mishnah is referring to cases that the king adjudicates according to laws he implements, or to cases of monetary law, that's the Ran, who says he is allowed to do that. So, very good, excellent. We found the problem, and Julia has remembered the answer very, very well. Excellent. Next. May save. What does that mean without looking in the translation? May save. Think about Seder night.
When he leans. He leans.
When he leans, correct, Jackie. What do we say on Seder night? Part of the four questions, isn't it?
Masubim.
Kulanu, masubim. We all lean. Okay, this is the same root. So what's it talking about? What's it talking about on Seder night, Jackie?
Because he's free.
When do we lean? Yeah, that's why we lean. When do we lean?
When we eat or drink.
Correct. When we eat or drink, and that's what this means. May save. When he, look in the translation now, when he reclines to eat, right? He kenegdo. It is opposite him. So in other words, he has his Sefer Torah opposite him at the table. Why?
To remind him he's king.
To appreciate what is being given and obey the commandments relating to it.
When you're a king and I imagine, I've never been a king and never been to a king's banquet either, but if you were, at a king's banquet, right, a state visit for President Trump in the UK happened a couple of weeks ago, and there was a state dinner at Buckingham Palace. And there's the king sat there in the, the top spot. And you've got everybody else there fawning around, saying how wonderful they all are.
Who's the king?
Well, okay, that's another question. That's a fair question. But you can imagine, can't you? You might get a bit full of yourself, right? In that scenario. So the Torah is there to remind you of what? It's there to remind you of Parashat HaMelech that we've just read. It's there to remind you that actually you are just a king of Basar V'Dam, of flesh and blood, and that there is another king who is known as Melech Malchei HaMelachim, the King of Kings, i.e. Kadosh Baruch Hu. So it's there as a reminder of your status as a human being, and that you should not get sort of carried away with yourself being the king. And why particularly Mesav when he's reclining to eat? And it's exactly what Jackie said. Picture, if you will, the beginning of Megillat Esther. Vayehi bimei Achashverosh, and it was in the days of Achashverosh, Hamolech Mehodu Vad Kush, who reigned from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, and it goes on to describe what? What is the beginning of the Megillah, first chapter of Megillah? What does it go on to describe?
A banquet.
A banquet, correct. And it went on for how long, Michael, did this banquet go on for?
Days and days.
Yeah. How many days?
I think it was 3 weeks.
Oh, much longer than that. 180 days. 180 days they were shikering for. And it says there, there were wine and as much wine. In fact, you had to drink wine. It was like, it was a halacha. You've got to drink. So you can imagine, can't you? There's this huge banquet, and the longer the banquet goes on, and the more the wine is flowing, and the more that they are reclining in their glory, the greater the need for a Sefer Torah, or the contents of a Sefer Torah, to bring you down to earth. So specifically, I think it says may save. I think it's talking about particularly at times where you are potentially going to, get ahead of yourself and get and think of yourself as rather haughty, because and it quotes the pasuk here. Which pasuk does it quote? Well, it quotes our pasuk, V'haita imo v'karavo kol yemei chayav, verse 19, Jeffrey.
And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of this Torah and these statutes, to perform them.
Next verse.
So that his heart will not be haughty over his brothers.
See? So that his heart will not be haughty over his brothers. The whole point of having the Sefer Torah with him at all times is to remember his position. Because, I imagine that, if you're the big knacker king with all this banqueting going on, very easy to, believe your own publicity and believe that you're a big knacker. So the Torah is there, and it says specifically in Parashat HaMelech to stop the king from being haughty, and it quotes our very, very pasuk there in the Mishnah. So that's the Mishnah. Let's just recap what we said. We went through our psukim, and then we went through the psukim about the horses. Susim, there you can see that. Lo yarbe lo susim. That was verse 16 here. Only he may not acquire many horses for himself. Then we went to Kesev v'Zahav here. Kesev v'Zahav, he shouldn't have too much money. That was verse, where was that?
17.
Yeah, we go, 17, thank you. Should not acquire too much silver and gold for himself in 17. And then the Mishnah spoke about the Sefer Torah being with him at all times. And that was verse 18 and 19, as we quoted earlier on. So the Mishnah is now told us the halachot. What the Gemarah is now going to do, we've got 5 minutes left, so we'll start a bit of the Gemarah. It's going to drill down now again into a little bit of grammar. We're going to get a little bit of grammar lesson here in the Gemarah. So the Gemarah says,
something, sorry.
Yes, Julia.
Gosh, we're looking, we've done the horses and the money. The wives is missing, but we have done the wives. Why is it all out of order?
You need to go back and listen to the shiurim from about 7 or 8 weeks ago, because we had a whole shiur on why it was all out of order. And if my memory serves me correctly, the Mefarshim say that the Gemarah puts it in the order that it will happen of danger. The Gemarah talks about the wives first because that's the greatest danger.
Remember that.
Whereas the Torah talks about it as it would happen. If we go back to the psukim, the psukim say, set yourself a king. The king, if he's not careful, will get loads of horses, and he'll get many wives. Why would he take loads of wives? Political marriages, right? That's what happened with Shlomo. And what happens when you make political alliances? You acquire silver and gold. Yeah, that's part of the political alliances. You get rich, and then that's a problem. You've got you get turned away from the commandments. That's verse 20. So the Torah puts it in the order it will happen, and the Gemarah puts it in the order of danger. And the biggest danger is the wives. So they dealt with the wives first.
But the Mishnah, which order is it in the Mishnah?
The Mishnah, the previous Mishnah, dealt with the wives.
And previous Mishnah dealt with the wives, right? Okay.
So when I say the Mishnah, the Talmud, Mishnah and Gemarah, dealt with the wives first. And we did ask that question. If I'll go back and I'll try and find the link to the right shiur, and I'll put it on the group, and then anybody who wants to have a quick listen to that bit can have a listen back to it.
Okay,
so you're quite right to point that out. Well spotted. So last couple of minutes, let's start the Gemarah. Tanu Rabbanan. The Gemarah quotes a Braita, which seems to say the same as the Mishnah, but asks a few questions of it. So Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a Braita, Lo yarbe lo susim, that's a quote of the verse in Parashat HaMelech. Yachol, I might have thought, afilu kedei merkavto ufarashav, even for his chariots and his riders, in other words, his army. You might think that he should not have a big army. You shouldn't have a lot of horsemen and horses as a big army. Talmud Lomer, the Torah comes to teach you lo yarbe lo. What does that word lo mean with a vav?
To him, for him.
To him or for him. Lo with an aleph is a negative. Don't, right? Lo with a vav means for him. So literally, if we translate this literally, what it means, he shall not increase for him or for himself horses. So the Gemarah says that word lo is a bit redundant. You could have just said lo yarbe susim. He should not increase the number of horses he has. If it didn't say the word lo, says this Braita, I might have thought that he wasn't allowed to increase the number of horses for his cavalry. In other words, he was only allowed to have a small army. Says the Gemarah, no. Lo eino marbe, for himself. In other words, for his own kavod. You know, we spoke about the motorcade when we spoke about this some time ago. You know, if you're a big knacker, you have 10 motorcycle outriders and 6 stretch limousines. If you're only a prince, you might only have 2 outriders and 1 limousine. And if you're just an ebachel, you'll just have nothing, right? The bigger the motorcade, the greater the covered. So here, what he's saying is, lo yarbe lo susim. Don't make yourself into a big knacker for just having horses for horses' sake. 1 second, Julie, I'll come to you in a sec. Aval, just finish the sentence. Aval, marbehu kedei richbo ufarashav. He is allowed to have a big army because that's very important to have a big army because, you know, if you don't have a big army, you'll be in trouble. It shows weakness and you daren't show weakness, certainly not in this part of the world. So you can't have a big knacker load of horses just for, you know, when I was learning this, I was thinking about the trooping of the colour. Yeah, you have all those horses of the trooping of the colour with the big stramels on, you know, and the red bekishes, right? And they're all riding about there. That's nothing to do with an army. That is mamash yarba lo susim. That is exactly what yarba lo susim looks like, right? All those beef eater chaps with all the stuff on and the gold chariot. That is yarba lo susim. A Jewish king does not do that. That is explicitly forbidden in the Torah. So if you were to get a situation where you had a Jewish king of England, don't know how that would happen since he's head of the church, but anyway, if that were to happen, he would have a problem because he would not allowed to be doing that trooping of the color business. But for an army, for his army, you can have as much as you need, no problem. Yes, Julia.
We may have discussed this before, but if we can get enough, if the king's permitted to have sufficient horses for the army, he presumably may get them from Egypt, and then we've got the prohibition about going to Egypt.
Okay, we did discuss this because what we asked was, are there two separate prohibitions here? Is there a prohibition against having horses, or is it only horses that you get from Egypt? In other words, you could ask your question on the flip side: is it okay if he gets loads of horses from Saudi Arabia or Ireland? I believe they do a lot of breeding in Ireland of horses, so I'm told. Right? Maybe they go. Maybe it's only Egypt that's a problem. We did discuss this, and we brought Meforshim, which said that ultimately it's two separate things. There's a prohibition against having the horses per se, and an extra prohibition about going to get them from Egypt.
Okay, so we assume then that all the horses are not Egyptian.
Yeah, I guess so. Unless, of course, you need them for the army and that's all you can get, then it becomes pikuach nefesh, doesn't it? Because you need, the army must have its supplies. So yes, I think that's fair. Okay, let's stop there because it's a good place to stop. We will stop by just saying what the question that the Gemarah is going to raise at the beginning of next shiur. We're going to raise the question, Ha ma ani mekayem susim. Why do we need to have this word susim in plural, right? That's the question. Why is that word in plural? And why does it, if you're not allowed to have any horses for yourself, why doesn't it not just say lo yarba lo sus? One horse. Don't look in the translation and don't look on. And that is the question that we can discuss at the beginning of next shiur, what we think, why it says susim in the plural. Okay, any questions on today's anti-ChatGPT rant and a little bit of Gemarah?
Can I just make a funny comment, if I can?
Yes.
You say anti-ChatGP about the woman. Well, maybe if he's made political alliances with his wife, she might want to accompany him, or may warn him that when he goes to war, he should behave himself.
Yes, I don't think that's a funny comment. I think that's a fair comment. The only problem is that is discussed in a different place, and ChatGPT tried to persuade me that what it was talking about here was not a Sefer Torah, but a woman. And he was very persuasive. He even brought me a Rashi to quote.
Okay.
But you're right, of course, that the Shlomo, why did Shlomo Melech fail? Because he said to himself, I don't need to follow these halachot because I am the wisest of all men. And the whole reason you're not allowed to have a whole load of wives is because they will turn your heart away from God. And that will not happen to me. Famous last words, because that's exactly what happened to him. His wives turned him away. And in the end, what happened was he had avodah zoras in the Heichal. So, we men may think that we are strong enough to resist the wiles of women, and we're not. We cannot. And therefore we have to be very careful. And that's why the Torah is telling us, do not be turned aside by all these thousands of wives. One is quite sufficient. And if you remember, we had the whole discussion when we discussed the wives. Do you remember this? When we discussed the wives, we had the question of, what if you've got 1,000 good wives? Is that okay? And what if you've got one bad wife that will turn you aside? Is that not okay? What if they were all like Abigail, if I'm not mistaken, the Gemarah said. What if they were all like Abigail, who was a great wife? The question is, it doesn't happen like that. You've got loads of wives, they will inevitably turn your head away. So that was that. Right, any questions? Jolly good. I will stop the recording.